it would also be helpful. Music. Get that ad out of the way. And then we can try and remember what the hell we're doing. Make sure, yep, hang on. Now, question is that music lowered because I changed the volume on OBS or in the program? Who knows? One day I'll be a professional and actually work out. Okay, halfway through the ad, then we can get started. One of these days, I'll actually edit these down when I upload them, rather than just uploading them direct. But I could at least cut out the first 3 minutes of nothing happening. But seriously, there's only a 5-minute cooldown on being able to run a 3-minute ad. So you could have a 3-minute ad every 5 minutes and just have people see 2 minutes of your stuff every 5 minutes. Someone out there has probably tried it and then lost all their viewers. Right now, what in the world is this nonsense, you might ask? As some people probably were there. Oh god, this has been going on for months now. It's about 6 months ago, I think we started doing all this stuff. Between me, Sheepa, and a few others, we've been messing around with the TTRPG system and trying to create it, and naturally, I got the thing of creating the creatures. We have created some creatures. Some are good, some I could do better. Well, actually, probably couldn't at this point, but I will do better because I'm going to learn. But one of the things I had started was like trying to get some basic ideas down of like templates, classification type thing of doing a bit of mix and match. So at the end of the day, we could say, okay, we want a bird that has this diet that would go into this biome, for example. So let's say, we had a carnivore, we'd have bird, carnivore, lava field, which would give us a very, very basic starting point of it's a bird, we know what it eats, we know where it lives. Now we have to fill the rest out. I mean, some things, obviously we already have a few things for the salt flats. I think we already have one thing for the lava fields. The big tortoise dude. But it would be nice to actually sort of like get a little bit of an idea. And I think I did have, was it this? No. Yes, it was that. I've just moved things since. I think the original idea about what this color coding bit was to do with how many things we wanted in each area. So tundra, desert, salt flats, lava field isn't going to have many things in it. Because obviously they're not very good areas to live. There's not a lot there. Islands and boreal forests, a bit more stuff. There's more things to eat, there's more things to get sorted out. And of course, islands being smaller, they have a smaller ecosystem that they could hold before everything collapses. And all the ones in green were the ones that we could have quite a few things in without us having to worry, because they're going to be large areas. Now, granted, Sheepa has lost the original map we did, or at least the one with the details on. We've got the basic layout of the land masses that we wanted. We've just lost all the info about like tectonic plates and temperatures and all that sort of stuff. So let's get rid of that for now and go back to this. You were the diets tab, so we've got our obvious ones. Carnivore and herbivore and omnivore. Of course, granted, carnivore and herbivore are also split down. There's opportunistic carnivore and opportunistic herbivore, and obligate carnivore and herbivore. Basically, the obligate one means that they have to eat that. It's like your cat. Your cat can only eat meat. You can't feed your cat a completely vegan diet or it will die. It needs meat because of how its digestive system is built. Likewise, there are some animals like rabbits that will just eat vegetables At least I think rabbits are. I don't think I've heard stuff about rabbits eating other stuff apart from vegetables. Maybe insects. But how much of that is by accident or not, I don't know. But then you've got things like chickens. Now you'd think chickens. They're lovely, they're herbivores, they're fine. Until you talk to anyone that's ever actually raised chickens. Because chickens will eat whatever is in front of their face. I've seen stories about chickens that have murdered the rats that were around the coop and then just fed on the rats. And it's like, you would not think that. The same with horses. Horses will just eat small birds. If there's a small bird in front of them, they will eat it. It's terrifying to think about, but it happens. Because they can at least digest those things. It's just not their normal thing they can eat. And then obviously omnivore, it's that little bit in the middle. You can do whatever. Humans are omnivores. You can eat vegetables, meat, insects, seeds, anything. For the most part. Unless you have, obviously dietary issues. Then we start getting into some of the more specific ones, like frugivore. Which is fruits only. I know there's probably a name for ones that only eat seeds. I don't know what it is though, so quickly, let's Google. Let's learn something. That doesn't help because seed eater apparently is actually just a type of bird as well. Okay, that's relatively simple. It's granivores. Not eating grandmothers. Yep, seed predators. That's just a weird idea. Seed predators. That just makes my brain go. Just the phrasing of that. We've got our insectivores. Are there any other normal ones? Non-fantastical element, not magical world based, just actual. Oh, I suppose ovivore, but then just eat eggs. I don't know how common that would be. I know there were some dinosaurs that pretty much primarily fed on eggs. I don't think there's that many things. Hmm. See, for now, I think that's our main ones for actual real world. Because I was chatting with Sheepa the other day about some of the other ones we wanted to have. Because obviously we're going to have things like manivores, which are obviously things that feed on mana. Um, but then you've got things like, do you want to have things like Umbravores that eat shadow? Not really going to be feasible for the most part. 'Cause, like, even in a magical sense, how'd you do that? I mean, obviously, you're going to have your, thinking about it from the top one. I know it's not technically a diet. But you're going to have the ones that, use light. For the most part, it will be just for plants. But there could be some animals that survive on the sun. You never know. It's the whole point of this is that we're creating a bunch of things from scratch. But then you've got things like elements. Would elements be a separate thing to manivores, or would they be a subset? Or would they be their own completely separate things? So things like, you got your pyrovores. Aerovore, which makes me giggle because there is a type of chocolate brand in the UK called Aeros, and I would completely be an Aerovore if that was if my wishes were met. Just completely just consume Aeros for the rest of my life, and then I would die in a week. You'd have a Lithivore, which is rocks. And Aquavores. At least if we were going, by the bog standard, you know, earth, air, fire, water elements. Don't know if we're going to be doing that yet. Because I do remember that we had been thinking about also including light and shadow as elements, but at least for certain magics. So I don't know whether those would count in this. Because technically, if you're consuming light magic, it's different from consuming light. So you would be like Solarvore or something. Possible. Might as well write it down. And since we've got that, might as well put the opposite one down as well. Hey, Ezzy. Oh no, I didn't click the button. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Triggerfire is not logged in. There you go. Had to do it manually, but I've at least also turned Triggerfire on now as well. I'm trying to think of the other one. Hang on, have I got it in? Okay, that was definitely not the right word to use in a chat with Sheepa. I tried to search for the I tried to search for Vor, and the only thing that I saw was "you have been vored." So obviously we did not talk about it in Telegram. Did we talk about it in the Discord? I don't think we did. That is unfortunate because I do remember we put in quite a lot of. Yeah, it might be on one of the documents that Sheepa had been working on. You woke up and feel like your head back to bed, and you lurks here. You are welcome to lurks here, Ezzy, and listen to me rambling about Vor. Apparently. Oh, thanks, Stream Elements, for finally telling me I'm live after 22 minutes. Oh, Stream Elements, just keep up the good job. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the timeline bit off the bottom. I don't need timeline right now. That was for a totally separate project. So that is a lot of diets we've got to choose from. Yeah, we've got our like realistic ones that the majority of things are going to be using. Yeah, the majority of stuff is going to be herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and all that stuff. But then we're going to obviously have some things that have little differences. Like I know that in my head I got the idea of like a forest that basically grew up on a zone full of mana, and so the trees are blue, like the leaves are blue. It's all odd and weird and pretty looking. But a lot of the creatures in there, they don't necessarily feed on the trees, they feed on the mana. So like the trees will be slowly decaying. So rather than dropping leaves, the leaves would just slowly be decaying on the tree and bits would be floating away. And then you'd have scavengers that sat on the trees trying to like grab those particles. Kind of like an above water version of what you'd have down at sort of deep sea vents in the ocean. You have little tiny creatures that are trying to filter feed, and obviously you then have things that would eat the things that are filter feeding, which would then technically be carnivores. But the base element would be the manivores that are trying to grab the sort of decayed leaf matter which contains all the mana out of the air, which would, you know, start the process off for them. At least that's one idea I had. I do need to run it past Sheepa because it would be an interesting area. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of forests. We want to have the option for players to have like interesting adventures. Granted, the adventures are going to be brutal for the most part, but we want them to have fun and have options open to them. Okay, so now it's time to tidy up some of these other ones here. So shrink you and shift you a bit. Try and put them into some kind of order. I might also expand this over as well, so we can give a brief description of the sort of environment that it's going to be. Like Salt Flats is salty, dry, hard ground, all that sort of thing. Just make it a bit easier when it comes time to doing them. Let's make sure that I'm on the right layer for this, because I want to just delete this whole underneath layer at some point. Okay, so Salt Flats is dealt with. Damn it, I've put that on the wrong layer again. There we go. The lava field, desert, and tundra are the ones I'm going to put up the top one. These are our four. There's not going to be many things living there. Biomes. So next one is the medium stuff, which I think we only had down as island and tiger. And then everything else. And yet this is going to look wonky until I delete out the layer underneath, so don't worry. So steps, planes, evergreen, temperate, and tropical. And then we'll just stick sea and / ocean at the bottom as its own separate thing, because I don't know how much we're going to fill out the sea and the ocean yet. That might be something we do at a later date for one of like the possible like module things we were thinking of. So let's change canvas size and zoop. Zoop a bit more. And give these things a few like descriptors. So we know that these are going to be dry. In fact, all of these are dry, which is one of the reasons why they don't have much in them. And yes, I know it sounds weird that the tundra still technically counts as a desert, because deserts are done by rainfall and precipitation, not by heat. And so technically a tundra is a desert. And it breaks my brain sometimes thinking that like the Arctic and Antarctic are technically deserts, at least in terms of like classification. I need to try and think of a convention of how we want to do this. Because we need to know how much water there's going to be. And what the temperature is going to be. Minimum. Because those will play into the survival stuff for the actual game. So obviously that's going to be hot. That's going to be cold. Lava fields would also be hot. Salt flats, I think we just had like middle range. They weren't hot, they weren't cold, they were just in the middle. It was mainly that they're very windy and they just did not have a lot of rain, which is why all the salt was there and why they were so dry. It wasn't so much because of the temperature. Obviously, they're going to be. Taiga and Boreal does have more. So it's not going to be wet. But we do know it's going to be cold. Let's just mark it down as. No, but then because that wouldn't work with Tundra, because Tundra would have snow as well, just not much of it. Let's just go with mid-range for now, like we do with the temperature on the salt flats. It's not extremely wet in terms of precipitation, again, but it's not dry. Now, swamps we know are going to be wet and warm. Um, Evergreens could be either. Let's put that as mid. Temperate is basically both. It's kind of the temperate kind of is the middle range of everything. Tropical is going to be wet and warm. Plains is probably going to be quite dry with mid temperatures. Depending on the plains. This is just like a... No, I'm going to have to go with mid again, aren't I, on this one? Because it could be either. Depending on where those planes are. We have some planes on the map that are quite north, so they would be cold planes. But we'd also have planes that are further south, which would be warmer. Sea and ocean. If that doesn't count as wet, I don't know what would. And steppes, I think, again, is a bit in between in terms of temperature and humidity. They're not like freezing cold at most parts of the year, but they're also not really hot at most parts of the year. Likewise, then, it's not torrential rain and it's not completely dry. So it's a little bit in the middle. An island... temperatures, I think, are going to be sort of middle range, depending on where the islands are. I don't think we've actually set out any plans for specific island change yet on the map. I think the only one that we've vaguely mentioned is the one that the Brassicans came from. Which would be sort of mid-temperature, mid-humidity. So I'm going to put that down as mid-mid. So you've got like at least a start for this. I mean, at some point, what I should have done with this is I should have been typing this up onto here rather than using my pen. But it's just easier for me. It gives us like a good mix of things we can go for now. So on the left, we've got the class of animals that it is. So, you've got your mammals, your birds, your reptiles, your fish, and all that. So all the things that have a spinal cord. We've got the insects and arachnids. And under there, I'm kind of also including under that everything that doesn't have a spinal cord. So we're talking worms, which aren't technically either of these. And jellyfish and all those sorts of creatures that just don't actually have a spine. Then we got monotremes, which are the weird ones, which don't match anything else. We're talking echidnas and platypus, I think, are the only two. Which are they're kind of like mammals, but they don't fit everything else. I mean, they're closest to mammals, but they've got things that mammals don't normally do. Like the whole laying eggs deal. So they're like sort of scooched in the middle of like either mammals and birds or mammals and reptiles. We've got plants and fungus, nice and simple, obvious ones. Trees and bushes I'm counting in plant because they're all plants. And then we have the two that are like much more sort of fantastical elements for our world, which are the monstrous ones and the alien things. So monstrous is what I'm counting for basically anything that doesn't fit everything else, that is actually pure and simple a monster. So in this, I'd probably count the long legs. Because technically it's not an arachnid, because it's got 10 limbs. So the closest thing it could be is a monstrous creature, because it is a quite terrifying beast we're going to have in the campaign. that at some point we will have to make a better name for, because Longlegs is a little bit silly for it. Probably just like one of the common names for the thing. And then Alien probably won't be a thing that happens much in the base game. But I know that we've I say me and Sheep have we've discussed and thought about possible future ideas of alien interactions, since extraterrestrial stuff is actually sort of built in as part of the backstory about why things are going on and why the world is so horrible to live in, and why there's so many quite evil creatures floating around. Then we've got our diets that we've gone through today, our carnivores, herbivores, and all that, and we've got our biomes. But what this means we can do now is that at any point, if I'm bored and I need something to work on, I can think to myself, right, let's go reptile, insectivore, lava field. Or bird, omnivore, swamp. We got some very set ideas about what we can actually build together now to create something. I mean, it might even be a thing that because I do have a randomizer thing on my phone, so I could theoretically do that, even if they're not used for the TTRPG and they're just there as a thing for me to practice with. I'll be able to use this. So I could just have a randomizer thing pick from each of these 3 columns and go, okay, a photosynthetic insect in the evergreen forests. That might be interesting. I get to think about, obviously it's going to be green. It's photosynthetic. What would it look like? It's going to have fairly open body plan. It can't be like normal insects where they're quite skinny or anything like that. It's going to need to be either it's going to need to be skinny and it can unfold itself like a butterfly, so that it can actually it waits until the sun's out, it opens up some membranes or something, it can get more sun. Or it's just going to have to be a wide boy. Yeah, we're talking some the weird leaf insects that are the ones that are that sort of shape, where they're quite not the stick insects like that, but the ones that have got a bit of bulk to the body. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be really helpful to have. When it comes down to doing these. Because things like flying, that's going to very much depend on what the creature at the start is. Theoretically, any of them could fly. So, you could have obviously we've got flying mammals, we've got bats and flying foxes and things like that. Birds are birds. Reptiles in the past have been known to be able to fly. We've had things like pterodactyls and Quetzalcoatlus and all those sorts of things in the past. So we have had flying lizards, and I think there are some that we still have that don't fly; they more glide. But again, we can still do it. Fish, obviously, flying fish don't actually fly; they glide. But there's nothing stopping us from having flying fish that actually fly. It's a bit weird, but it could be that they live in like areas like the mana forests, and they glide on the mana or something. Can mess around with it. Amphibians again can pick and choose whether we want them to fly. Same with insects and arachnids. Let's think. What else would it be? Things like exothermal and endothermal. Again, that's going to be more based on the creature rather than what we want. Because, like, you're not going to get an endothermic cold blooded mammal. Or if you do, that's going to be very weird. Because for the most part, all mammals are warm blooded. That's kind of one of the things that mammals have. Same with birds. But then you got reptiles, fish, and amphibians that are mostly cold-blooded, with I think some fish being warm-blooded depending on type of fish. Things like the great white sharks, things like that, are more warm-blooded than cold-blooded. I think they can change their temperature as they need to like save energy. I think I might be making that up. I'm sure I have heard that there are some sharks that are able to control their body temperature so that like if they're going hunting, for example, they will like boost their body temperature a bit to make it more energy efficient for themselves to move around quicker. I don't know. That is me possibly pulling that out of my ass. Ah, I mean, I have like I watched it. Was it today or yes? I think it might have been yesterday. I watched it. Someone was going. Someone that has done some like creature design for sort of major titles in the past was going through like a few questions to ask about the creatures as well. Things like, what is it? Well, no, not what is it, who is it? Which is more to do with, compared to the player, who is this creature? Is it just a creature that you can hunt? Is it just something that just exists in the background? Is it a predator that you're going to have to face? Is it a monster that you're going to have to face? Because it helps like give a bit more personality than I think the reasoning was. Yeah, it's all well and good saying you've got a carnivorous bird in the lava fields, but if you go to the lava fields as your character and you see this creature, what's it going to do? Is it going to just ignore you? Is it going to think you look tasty? I'm going to go for you, or is it just going to try and defend its territory? Could be any of them. But again, that for the most part, all of these are going to be something that you either can hunt or is going to hunt you. There's going to be very little in this that just ignores you. It's mostly going to be the very small things that just don't bother. They're more like there as like resources for the players than anything else. Trying to think of any other questions that we could ask. Well, not I say questions like things we can help prompt about what these things are going to do. I mean, there is always the idea of like sort of genetic relation. So, like, let's say I think we'd created like 3 different variations of the long legs, depending on the area you found them. For the most part, they live in the forest of the salt flats, and they've evolved to have very long legs that look like tree trunks. Great camouflage, wonderful. But then there are some that live in canyons without any trees. So those things, they're not going to be really tall and have like huge like tree trunk legs, because that does not help them. What they do have is speed and the ability to cling onto the side of the walls of the canyons. So they will run along the canyon things and comfort. Yeah, they will run you down. And we had cave ones, which still had their long legs, but let's say you had a cave like this, the long legs would sort of put its legs out to the side, so that you'd just be casually walking through the cave, and you'd have no idea that this thing was right above your head. At which point it could quite easily just go zoop, and eat anything that looks edible that goes through its legs. That one was very much an ambush predator. It did not hunt. It was very much an ambush. But all 3 of them, they are all long legs, so they all have some genetic ancestor. Is that a thing worth asking at the start, though? Maybe, because it would like give us some like basic ideas, but again, it would also only make any difference if we'd already created something that was similar in another area. So let's say we'd already created a herbivorous mammal, which we have. We've created the giant sheep. That one was up in the northern plains, so it's going to be cold up there. So these like mega ovis, I think I'd called them, were just big sheep with a lot of wool. Keep themselves warm, and also they were herd animals. So they were. Maybe could be an idea. Just lifestyle, like things like herd animals, solitary. That could be one that we use. What other options would there be apart from like living on your own, living in a group? Migratory? Because that could work for either of them. Yeah, most birds live in flocks, and a lot of them migrate. But there are also like solo birds that migrate in giant flocks. So they will, when the time comes, the solitary birds will all go into one big flock together and go and migrate to, because it makes it so they're more likely to survive. That could be a question we could ask, because depending on like how what it is, like things like if you're a solitary predator, you're going to look very different and act very different than if you're a herd predator or pack animal. I'm just using herd as a generic group term. Maybe if it is like a carnivore, would you want to think about like how it's hunting? So would we have like pack hunters? We'd have ambush predators. There'd be stuff that involves like poisons, toxins. No, I'm not gonna say poison. Technically, it's venoms. Let's make sure we don't have people angry at us for using the wrong words. We're gonna have scavengers. What other behaviors? Because on this one, there's going to be like a bit of a difference as well. Because whereas the other ones would be picking one from each, on this technically we could pick multiple. Yeah, we could pick herd, migratory, ambush, and scavengers, which would make for an interesting idea. Yeah, you got a herd of ambush predators that migrate. Could work. Maybe. Not sure how to go about designing them and creating them, but that's the whole point of this list, is to give ideas to work with, and so we're not just going, oh, let's just do a big cat, let's just do a horse or some kind of trap. It kind of gives us like a basis to go with. So what other behaviors could we have? So we've got the top three, which are the behaviors to do with. Hang on, let's break this down a bit. So they're either a herd animal or a solitary animal. They have migratory and territorial. Because obviously, chances are, if you're territorial, you aren't going to be leaving your area to go on a migration. And likewise, if you're migratory, you probably aren't going to care about the territory you live in. You probably just turn up and then pick a spot and hope it works. Then we've got our pack hunters, ambush, venom, scavengers. I wouldn't think traps would be a separate thing, because like I'm thinking more like giant spiders or anything like that. They would still count as ambush predator. They would just use, you know, webs or whatever to be able to do said ambush. Oh, what else would we have? Other behaviors that we can use for this. Oh, we could do the persistence hunter. which is really is going to be one of the most terrifying ones we could have if it was a thing that we had in the game. For those not sure, humans used to be persistence hunters because we were smart. You injure your animal runs away. Animal stops to have a rest because it thinks it's safe. Suddenly the humans are there again. Animal gets up, runs some more, takes another rest. Suddenly the humans are there again. Rinse and repeat until the animal is so worn out it cannot run, and we just walk up and stab. That is essentially what persistence hunting was. Because of the fact we were bipedal and we could jog for large distances, things like you got marathon runners and all this, most creatures can't do long distance running. They do short sprints and then they stop and then they walk. That goes for both predators and prey. Yeah, for the most part, if you've ever seen nature documentaries, animals will always be walking unless they're in danger, and then they will run. As soon as danger's stopped, they will slow down instantly. They won't carry on running, they will just stop. They will slow down, they will carry on, they'll walk. And the same with predators and hunting creatures and all that. You have things like the cheetah, incredibly quick, but it can only do it for about 15 seconds before it's absolutely tired and it cannot do it anymore. So it's a very much you've got one shot, run, grab it. If you miss, you're screwed. You've got to wait until you've got your energy back before you go after something else. Humans were not like that. Humans had endurance. Humans had intelligence. And humans had decent eyesight. Mix all those things together would mean that you could jog for hours, keeping up a good pace. You could track your prey. You could look at the ground. You could see, either the blood on the ground from where you shot the creature with an arrow, or you could see, tracks in the ground, fur in the trees, all these sorts of things that people use for tracking nowadays. It's a thing we've been doing since the very early days. But when you mix that with being able, the tracking with being able to keep a persistent running going, creatures could not outrun us, and so we caught up to them and got them. Simple as that. And when you think about that from the animal's point of view, that is terrifying. So imagine if we did that to the players, and we had at least a couple of creatures that you had to be very, very cautious of. If you knew you were near their territory, you had to be very, very careful. Because they would just chase you. Even if they literally just walked, and that, when you went to rest the next time, the DM would be rolling a couple of dice behind their screen to see whether the thing caught up with you in the middle of the night. Yeah, could you imagine, middle of the night, this persistent hunter just turns up in your camp, and it's time for combat. You're all flat-footed. You're all probably armorless and weaponless in the middle of the night, which would make it even worse. It would mean that things like having watchmen out that knew what to look for at night would be a big deal for the game. Having fire could help deter them, maybe. It could attract them, depending on what type of creature it was. Yeah, if you go into the area where one of them is like it knows what a fire is, it's smart enough to know what a fire is and how to deal with fire. Having a big fire in your camp, it's going to keep you warm. Sure, it's going to be good for food, but it's not going to deter these predators from coming after you. So you'd need to find other ways. So that could give some interesting. Like, granted, it'll be DM's discretion on whether to use them or not. But having the options there might be quite. It gives some like interesting options, I think. Okay, so what else we got? I mean, the venom kind of could also come under persistence because depending on how strong the venom is, you bite and then you wait. Obviously, a lot of things have venom that's strong enough to like act before they can get away, but not always the case. I mean, I think I've heard the thing to do with scorpions that the bigger the scorpion's claws are compared to the body, the less worried you can be about the sting. Because the reason they have the big claws is probably to hold prey there long enough for their venom to take effect. If they have very tiny claws, they might not need to hold things for long. Their venom, chances are, is quite strong, and it knocks things out quite quickly. Obviously, that's also like it's based on like more like a ratio to the body size. Because obviously, a very tiny scorpion could still have big claws, but still be very tiny claws to us. And likewise, a massive scorpion could just have a lot of venom. I'm going to leave a tiny gap there because I don't think there's any other methods of hunting that we could use. And really, venom is more a way to kill rather than how. I mean, I suppose really the only other option would be things like just sheer speed. Like I was saying with the cheetah, they don't hunt in packs. They don't ambush. Technically, they don't ambush. I don't think because they don't like lie in wait. They follow the herds and try and pick out the thing that is the weakest. So I don't think that counts as ambush hunting because obviously they're not just sitting lying in wait. Ambush is more for things like spiders that will just sit there. Well, web spiders. Obviously, there's hunting spiders as well that will actually go out and hunt things. But it's like the regular kind of hunt. When I'm thinking speed, I'm thinking the regular kind of hunt that predators would have, which is you see the herd of deer, you have a look around, that one looks the weakest. I will run at it very quickly and bite it. Or I will run at it and chase it until it gets tired and then bite it. Okay, now other than that, I don't think there's anything more that we could ask in terms of. I say that there probably is because there's going to be things like coloration. Like, chances are, if it's a tundra creature, it's going to have white fur, or white scales, or white whatever the coating of the animal is. Because it's going to want to be at least camouflaged, either to protect itself from predators or to hide from prey. So there's going to be stuff like that, but that is more going to be very much based on everything else than be a separate, because you're not going to like say it's going to have white fur in the steppes, because if you're looking at the steppes it's all green and you just see this little white dot moving, you can see that it doesn't matter what the thing is, you can see it. And I suppose the only other thing would be to do like a similar thing that we had for the predators bot. So grazer, filter feeder, um, I've never really thought about different ways of predating plants. Technically, I think they're trying to rename it now so that even that all creatures are predators in some way, which means that even herbivores are counting as predators of plants, which seems really weird to me. But that's because I've spent my entire life with them being a separate thing. I think they're trying to have it so that the word prey is more a descriptor than a sort of class of animals. Like, grass is the prey of a cow. Which, like I say, it seems weird. And I don't know if it's like mainstream or anything, but I have seen things that I think indicate that some people want that to be a thing. Okay, so what? So grazers is they just constantly eat. That's mostly going to be like herd animal things like cows, sheep, and all that. They will just munch as they go. Filter feeders, for the most part, aren't going to be a thing. They're mostly going to be either underwater or the mana forests. But the options there. I mean, I suppose technically filter feeders could live on pollen and stuff like that. Would be a bit weird, but could be a thing. Opportunistic is more like they don't eat. They're not a grazer. They don't eat it all at once. They will just like eat a bunch of stuff and then they will move on with their day, and then they will eat a bunch of stuff and then they will move on with their day. So I don't. Opportunistic probably isn't the right word for that. Like intermittent, maybe. Look, intermittent feeders. I can't remember how to spell that word because I have not used it in so long. Is it intermittent or ant? Intermittent? No, intermittent. I mean, the intermittent ones they could hoard, I suppose. Yeah, I'm thinking like granted it's in our it's more things like bees and ants and stuff like that, but I don't think there's nothing really stopping bigger animals from doing it. I mean, I know that got things like hamsters and that will like stuff their cheeks and then bury stuff. That would really be kind of hoarding. So yeah, it's not just like ants and bees that would do this. It is granted. I say bigger creatures. We're still talking squirrels and other rodents. But if you got anything, there could be like medium-sized hoarders that like they're pack creatures. They live in like a cave area, and they will go out hunt for stuff, bring the food back as a like central storage in the cave that the entire herd can eat if needed. So if you've turned up and you've got loads of food that you found, but some other creature of your little herd didn't find anything, they're not going to starve because it's a social thing. You have brought back food enough to go on the pile. It's all good. So that could be an interesting one. Oh no, Ace is trying to make me be healthy. How dare you? I don't want to live. That's the hydrate. I have checked my posture. My posture is terrible, but it is checked. No, my posture's fine. Oh, that's a good stretch. I haven't stretched my back all day. And just to be sure, I'll stretch my wrist, even though I haven't really done any drawing or anything. We have a good like range of like things we can work with now. We've got our type of creature, the type of diet, the area it will live in, and then a few other categories on the side that we can use if we want. We don't have to. Is it a solitary or herd animal, migratory or territorial? If it's a hunter, which of these hunting things does it? If it's a carnivore hunter or whatever, which of these things does it use? If it's a herbivore, which of these does it use? So we can do like a bit of a mix and match now for quite a few things. There's going to have quite a lot of combinations that we can have. And of course, nothing's stopping you from having the same conversation. I mean, things like the granivores. There were different sizes of seeds. One of the main, like one of the biggest ones with biology is the finches. That Mr. Charlie did. That there are some finches that have like, well, there's not even some. There's a lot of different beak shapes. They all eat seeds, but the beaks have changed based on the kind of seed they go for. So there are some that are like quite chunky. Therefore, the big seeds that need a lot of force. But then you've got like quite small beaks that are for little seeds. You know, you don't need a lot of force. You can just pick it off the thing, pick it off the floor, pick it off the plant. It's you know, less than a mouthful. You don't even need to chew. Whereas obviously the bigger beak, it's things like, you know, that have like a big shell that you need to crack through. So you'd have like any kind of like beaks like that. I do actually have an image somewhere of a bunch of different types of beak and what they eat. So yeah, there's nothing stopping us from using the same things more than once. We're allowed to have multiple carnivorous animals in the swamps. All we need to think of is that we make sure that there's enough prey creatures around to actually have a viable population of, you know, the carnivores. That's all we need to have. And the world, as far as I know, is meant to be like 4 times bigger. That I think she wanted it to be like 4 times the size of Earth. And I think the plan was same gravity, so just a bigger planet. Now, the question is, it's 20 past 11. Do I have it in me to actually do any kind of design stuff at this point? Or has this been an hour and 20 minutes of me talking to myself about a list of things? I mean, it has been an hour and 20 minutes of me talking about a random list of things to myself. I did try and grab Sheepa, but Sheepa's just too tired. He was too sleepy. I think worn out from the DM stuff he's been doing. That is not what I wanted. I wanted new, not create from clipboard. So I was watching something earlier that kind of someone that is like very good at drawing animals gave a basic breakdown of how they look at animals. When they're doing their sketchy stuff. And it was pretty much split into these 6. If we're assuming quadruped, it was pretty much this. But as long as we know like the basic shapes we want to work with, we can tweak things. You know, we could say, okay, the head is still like this, and we have the neck, but we have absolutely massive shoulders. There's the trunk, and then the pelvis, and then a tail. So it's more of a slanted one. There's nothing stopping us doing it the other way. I don't know why we would. But we technically could. No, let's make that a bit more. There we go. There's nothing stopping us from, like, having more of a slanted one going down. All it's going to take for a bunch of these is just tweaking. I mean, this is probably how I would start out. I mean, this is how I've started out with some of the things in the past. I've had an idea in my head, and I've gone and found reference for it. But with this, doing it this way, we might not necessarily have to follow an existing plan. Obviously, the first one we did was the sheep, the big derp boy, and for that I went and found, I think it was a buffalo, like the skeleton of a buffalo anatomy, to get the basic idea of what we wanted this thing to be like. So using the thing that we've already got, we were looking at, we've got, hang on, let me beef up. So we've got the head, we've got a very short neck and the leg, we've got the trunk, we've got the pelvis, and we have the tiny little droopy tail. So we have all the 6 elements. They're just in a specific arrangement. I mean, to be honest, there's a part of me that also almost wanted to shrink the back end down. So it was much more. Hang on, let me find what layer that was even on. Look, a much like lower down back. I mean, I don't know. It, like I say, this was the first one that I did for this, so I was throwing ideas at the wall at the time. So at some point, what I do want to do is pick like a middle ground creature. Not too big, not too small. Probably like a big cat or a dog or something along those lines. That has sort of like the middle of the road body structure. And that way, I mean, some bits are going to be relative. Like the skull is going to be very, very variable based on whatever the creature is. But for the most part, it's always going to be a generic sphere bit, and then we can kind of carve into it with whatever we need it to be. The neck is mostly going to be length and width that changes. So it's either a small one, a thick one, long, short, mix and match. Tails are going to, like, again, be very simple because they're either going to be like long and thin, big fluffy things, whatever. But the 2 bits that I know that I'm going to need to do work with are these bits because they're the complicated parts. Because these are the ones that have got, a bunch of bones. Going in different areas, and there's nothing saying that the bones have to be in this arrangement or even in this ratio. Yeah, there is nothing stopping you from having, a really long bone there, and then the tiny bit. If it fits what the creature's trying to do, I think there've been quite a few, like, prehistoric things that have had that kind of, like, limb shape. Or even, like, long there and then that. I mean, I've got a feeling that one of these is kangaroos. Because kangaroos, when they're hopping, when they're not bouncing on their back legs, they have this structure. They have the, like, the facing down. They have tiny front arms, massive legs at the back, but then they have the huge counterbalance tail. So yeah, I think at least until, like, I can get to a point where my animal anatomy is better, there probably won't be too much designing. I might, like, do some, like scribble down ideas here and there, but I'm not gonna, like, try and do them properly. I don't think yet, unless I really haven't got anything else to do and I need to draw. Because I say I do need to improve the animal anatomy stuff first, and everything else. Because, I'm still not a good artist. I know enough to make lines. I know enough to draw a decent circle sometimes. My line work needs work. And obviously, when it comes to stuff like this, there's also things like shape language. I mean, we are, at least for this, we're trying to make them relatively realistic. But if we ever decide that we want to, like, let them be a bit more stylized, there is stuff that we can, things like the postling is very much a round shape, and they are friend shaped. Whereas there's going to be other things that might be very angular. The shape language says this is evil. This is not a nice thing. But shape language, when you look at the natural world, if you look at a shark, apart from sharp teeth, sharks are not angular. Well, okay, then some of them can be quite angular depending on the species, but for the most part, they're just long, curvy boys in the sea. And curves are meant to be happy friend shapes, according to shape language. Which, that just doesn't work. I mean, there are some things, obviously, like urchins. You look at it and you go, that's not friend shaped, that's spiky. That makes sense in shape language. But there's a lot of, like, quite nasty stuff out there that doesn't fit it, and so I'm not really that fussed about learning shape language at the moment. Although I know it's something that I probably should do if I do want to do more of this stuff in the future, and, like, make things, like, a bit more stylized for me once I get to once I get, like, anatomy down and I want to make my things. Maybe I will want to go more shape language routes, but I don't know. For now, I think it's just going to be mostly just animal sketches, trying to break them down to, like, these 6 elements, trying to learn more about, the actual shapes rather than the shape language. And I'm aware that there are probably people that haven't. When I say shape language, they probably have no idea what I'm talking about. And frankly, I barely do as well. The easiest way I can explain it is, if you have a circle and a spiky thing, out of these two, one of them. Hang on, let's just make sure they both have the same sort of like weird smile. So, of these two, one of them looks friendlier than the other because of the shape. That's shape language for you. Yeah, round, curvy things, smooth things tend to be thought of a certain way. Sharp, spiky things are thought of in a certain way. Like wobbly things tend to be thought like if it's like a wiggly thing, it tends to be thought of in a certain way. And that's basically what all shape language is when you're designing a character, if you want them to be a friendly character, you for the most part you make them fit the shape language of friendly. So you give them rounded edges. You make them, look like they're a friend. You put them in a posture that looks at ease, friendly. Whereas if you're making something that's evil, you want to make the shapes be things that look evil. You want the poses to be things that make them seem menacing, and all these sorts of things. Will I ever use all that stuff? I have no idea. But I have no idea where I'm going with any of this, whether it be my art or this rambling. So before I ramble way too much, I'm going to see if there's anyone to raid. There, Stars is on. Let's raid Stars. I mean, granted, we always raid Stars, but she's one of the few people who's on at this time of night. Anyway, so thank you for spending an hour and 40 minutes listening to me waffle about stuff. I mean, it's been productive waffling, at least for me. At some point, we'll have to actually put this into motion and try using it for something. Now that we've got it sorted out. But until then, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.